Hi guys, today we are going to talk about something quite affordable but still really good, and it's coming from SMSL, a brand that specializes in those kind of things. Here we have SMSL RAW-MDA 1. And this is a DAC that also has a headphone amplifier. DAC section looks really strong on paper. It's Sabre 9039. It's not the Pro version, but still it's very high quality DAC chip. And then the headphone amplifier has 1.7 watts into 32 ohms, which is quite a significant amount of power. And these spec facts look even more impressive if I tell you that RAW-MDA 1 is $280. Connectivity is also quite rich. In the back you can see several digital inputs, and the odd thing is that we have two optical inputs, two coaxial inputs, one USB, which is in form of USB-C, and on the analog output side we have single-ended RCAs and balanced XLRs. These are line level outputs, and both of these are variable in level. And the power inlet is AC, as you can see, and that means that the power supply is inside of the unit, so you do not have an external brick and you cannot upgrade it either. In the front we have two different headphone outputs. One is 6.35 millimeters, that's single-ended, and the other one is 4.4 millimeters, that's usually balanced connection. But in this case, even though it's not clearly stated anywhere in the marketing materials and spec table, I firmly believe that this is just single-ended output connected to 4.4 connector, because the power and the sound is basically the same between these two. And that's something that a manufacturer would call a convenience output. If you already have 4.4, you can use it without changing the connector or cable of your headphones, but the signal itself, coming from the device, is single-ended on both of these outputs. Connectivity aside, everything else is quite usual. There's an LCD display, it's of a colored variety, and one volume knob, and quite normal user interface and settings menu for SMSL, which is quite rich. It enables you to change digital filters, some other settings like DPLL, gain on the headphone output, you have low and high, screen brightness, etc. And one interesting thing is that SMSL lets you choose between two different info screens. There's the one that has been around for a few years now, and the newer, in my opinion, slightly nicer looking one. And you can switch between these two according to your taste. It's just a nice touch. But let's get to its actual performance now. Now, I first started using it as a DAC with its line outputs on the back to check how it works in that arrangement. And I was met with really well-balanced sound. I almost don't know really how to describe it without using those phrases like it sounds natural and neutral. And it really does, because no obvious things like, oh, this is like more open and bright sounding DAC, or like the opposite of that, a warmer sounding DAC. None of that would be true, because it really sounds neutral, but there are other qualities of the sound aside from tonality, and one of these is, for example, sound staging. And this being a more budget-oriented DAC, like a few years ago you would be met with quite a spatially flat soundstage, which I immediately notice is not the case with RAW-MDA 1. There's a decent sensation of three-dimensionality. The soundstage size in general is not really big. If you go to more expensive DACs, and especially some other technologies like R2R, you will be met with much bigger soundstage. So it's just reasonable, normal, modest soundstage in between your speakers and behind them, because as I said, there's a decent sense of three-dimensionality with this one. And tones are well separated. They're not melted together and blended together. Background darkness is pretty decent too. Tones just sound clean and clear, and as I said, they're well separated from each other. And you do not feel that flatness of similarly priced DACs several years ago. It's a similar story with dynamics. Once again, same price point like 3, 4, 5 years ago would sound dynamically flatter. This one is not like that. It's more alive sounding. It breathes up and down, and it can at the same time in the same track present something that is more laid back and lower in volume and keep it calm there, and then put something that is closer to you, punchier, more loud, and keep these two separated and clean and on a different like volume levels quite easily, in a way that, as I said several years ago, DACs of this price couldn't do. They would dynamically compress that a bit more. So yeah, it's a lively, clean sounding DAC, and I quickly took two other DACs to compare it with. One was Topping D53 that costs $200, and the other one is SMSL's own D6S that also costs $200, but these are standalone DACs. They do not have headphone amplifiers, so this comparison is quite fair in my opinion. And I'm happy to say that all of these three DACs are in the same tier. To cut the long story short, I think that SMSL D6S may be a touch, but really a touch more resolving and revealing than the other two in terms of mid-range details and crunchy things like wind instruments, tone textures. That's just a bit cleaner than what you would hear here on Topping and on SMSL RAW. And actually SMSL RAW-MDA 1 and Topping D53 in a way sound more similar, that they have this clean but maybe slightly more laid back sound in the mid-range. It's still very resolving, but just not as engaging and as crisp as D6S. Basically, if you only need a DAC, I would still recommend SMSL D6S as the slightly better sounding one than these other two. And it's also a standalone DAC, so it's more affordable than RAW-MDA 1 here. But if you do need a headphone amplifier, MDA 1 is so close that you don't need to worry about that. Actually, in most real-life scenarios, in most hi-fi setups that you would use these DACs, I guess that hearing any difference between these three DACs would be really difficult, if not impossible. But I'm testing them in a much more transparent system with much pricier preamp, amplifier and speakers, just to notice this small difference so I can convey them to you. But now let's talk about its performance on the headphone outputs. Because not all 2-in-1 DACs and amps sound equally good on both of their outputs. For example, older SMSL M500 MK2 that I really loved as a DAC had a different, drier, thinner sound on its headphone outputs. So it's not a given that all of the available connections will sound equally good. But in this case, I'm happy to say that headphone output sounds fantastic. Everything I said about the DAC section, that clean, very neutral, quite three-dimensional sound and great tone separation and just the sensation of empty space between tones, all of that stands for the headphone output too. If there's any difference, I would say that the headphone output adds just a touch warmth into the bass section. And it's not overcooked, it's just a really nice full sounding bass line, but still clear, nimble, punchy, and great clean mid-range, very extended highs. And I'm especially happy to say that there is a lack of any sort of grain in the sound. Highs are extended, they're sparkly, they're open, but the tones themselves are smooth, they're quite liquid, and that was never given for affordable DAC and like solid state amplifier that doesn't have tubes anywhere. And I don't have it currently with me because it's at my friend's, but if you compare this one with older SMSL C200, that was $220, you would immediately notice that RAW-MDA 1 sounds at the same time cleaner, and tones are cleaner and crisper and of a higher resolution, but the overall level of bass warmth and just fullness and juiciness is basically the same. But after tones of MDA1, tone decay in time is observable for longer, and it gives that like realistic, smooth, liquid-like character to the tone. C200 is warm sounding in that concealing way. It hides a bit of fine details and it ends tones quicker, but it sounds a bit blurrier and fuzzier. So MDA1 is improvement in terms of sheer clarity and resolution and just speed. In the liveliness of higher frequencies, they feel more radiant, but at the same time, tones feel smoother and they last longer in time. And that bass warmth of MDA1 is not as concealing, and it does not muddy fine details the way that C200 could sometimes do. And I didn't have Topping DX3 Pro Plus for a direct comparison, but I remember that one sounding very detailed but very analytical and dry. And I can easily say just right out of the bat that RAW-MDA 1 is a much more natural sounding device. It has equal amount of that high frequency detailing, but everything sounds more liquid-like, more coherent in terms of time domain and how continuous tones sound. And it's a better sounding device overall. So I was impressed, and I've decided to compare RAW-MDA 1 immediately with something clearly much pricier, and in this case that was the Topping D53 and Topping A53 stack of a standalone DAC and standalone headphone amp. And this stack together costs $440. And I started doing that by using single-ended outputs on both of these. And to my big surprise, without any doubt, RAW-MDA 1 actually sounded better than the stack. Once again, it proved to be just cleaner overall, tones were better separated and had longer time decay. They sounded naturally extended in time. Topping stack was a bit more congested, slightly muddier, and slightly drier sounding with shorter tones. It's not a thing of preference, it's a thing of RAW-MDA 1 at $280, sounding better than this stack of standalone devices at $440. But the thing with this stack is that the headphone amplifier is truly balanced. So once you switch to balanced output, you do actually gain a significant amount of performance and fidelity. And as I told you in the beginning of the video, I do not hear that with SMSL here. So when I did that, when I switched to their balanced outputs, the stack improved noticeably. It gained wider, bigger sound stage, cleaner tones, better tone trail, tone decays, better high frequency extension, and at that moment these two were basically matched. SMSL had slightly warmer bassline that is maybe a touch less precise, but it's juicier and fuller, compared to a touch tidier bassline on Toppings, which also sounded touch more analytical overall speaking compared to that slightly warmer and bassier sound of SMSL. But it's the same level of performance, just with a slightly different tonalities. And the fact that the stack of 440 needed to use its best balanced output to match what SMSL RAW-MDA 1 at $150 lower price is doing on both of its outputs makes for a very surprising and unexpected situation. To actually defeat it, you would need a pricier stack or a pricier 2-in-1 device like Rose Technics RT500, for example. And I tried it, even that one is just, it is better than SMSL RAW-MDA 1, but it's not as better as its pricier. So the conclusion, if you don't want to go to something pricier, like this Rose Technics at $600 that I mentioned, I don't know anything below that price that is like $450, $400 that I reviewed up until now that can actually beat RAW-MDA 1 at just $280, which makes SMSL RAW-MDA 1 just simply a great sounding device that would not embarrass itself next to anything up to like $600-700. While I was testing this DAC and amp, I was using my VRM2 headphones. Those are planners that go for 400 to 500 euros, depending on the version you buy. And this combination, this small and fairly affordable DAC and amp, and those great, fantastic, revealing planar headphones gave me so much fun and so much high fidelity that I really enjoyed listening to the music, and I was in no rush whatsoever to switch to one of my much pricier DACs and amps. Even though, yes, in absolute terms they are better at this or that, but this one sounds good enough that for the most of the time I simply don't care. And if I didn't already have those much pricier devices, and if I was presented with a choice, I would seriously consider, is anything pricier actually worth that price difference when something this good can be bought at this price. And with that, I hope you liked the video. See you next time. Bye.